Good afternoon, everybody. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you gather back to listen to where we're going and what we're doing as we continue the conversation in our third episode of 9 Degrees North broadcast on leadership. So today, as we look at leading to grow or growing to lead, we're going to expand that conversation a little bit and go a little bit deeper into just one of the two of those topics. So understanding the statement that is pressed out there in this discussion, leading to grow or growing to lead, you might be asking yourself, if you've listened, as you've listened to maybe some of the past episodes, what am I really getting at when I ask that question? Leading to grow or growing to lead? Both of those have their place, and neither of them are necessarily bad in their own place. But what we want to look at today is understanding and looking at the latter of those two statements: growing to lead, growing yourself, looking at yourself closely, examining yourself honestly, and finding those things that you need to spend some moments and time reflecting upon to get to some particular results and reactions. So many of the times we lead places that we don't really spend a lot of time focusing on what are our strengths to help me get there, get further. So here in this episode, we're going to look and examine both of our strengths and our weaknesses, and then hopefully beg the question of how do we and what do we do to create those pauses in our lives to create the opportunity to do the hard work of self-reflection. And we recognize that self-reflection is not easy. And what does that self-reflection really do for me? What does it resolve for me? So what does self-reflection really mean is really the premise of our discussion. And I'm not asking you as a spouse to self-reflect on your spouse. I'm asking you to look at yourself. It's self-reflection, not self-reflection on others. It's me focused. So why self-reflection is important? Because it is part of your personal growth. Self-reflection may feel like it's maybe the latest craze or the greatest thing that's going on, and that's really from the area of the reading category in most bookstores of self-help. I want us to go beyond self-help for the sense of your own self. I want us to look at self-reflection from the standpoint of what are you doing to help yourself move yourself to be a better leader. We all lead somebody, as we discussed in our first episode. There are people watching your reactions to this, that, or the other thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is, but people are gleaning and learning from you based upon how you react, how you respond to situations, how you endure tests or trials or situations around you. Now, if we go all the way back in time, we go back to ancient Greece, Socrates himself, as he faced the executioner, said these 7 words: the unexamined life is not worth living. Now, I don't think that was a suicidal thought or tendency, but it was one I think that we need to understand this afternoon is anchored in on growth, looking for your potential, looking for what can be more and what you can do more to become more to help lead, grow, and push others to their greatness. So while the statement that we look at might sound even extreme, the unexamined life is not worth living. Life is life. And after all life is worth living. So what we get to do along that journey is examine for ourselves our own beliefs. And you'll hear mine through the course of any of these episodes as you listen. But we also want to reflect and self-examine on our attitudes, our actions, and understand just significantly how vital these personal decisions are and how vital it is to have self-reflection as a personal challenge, because it is the outcome that brings forth growth in you. So again, the question, what exactly is self-reflection and how does it achieve for me my goals for personal growth? And as we look at this, I might also ask you and ask the same question: do we really have goals for self growth? So let's look at self reflection and let's look and understand why it is most important of all the things that you can do for your own personal development. It will also not only move you, but it'll move others around you. Those who forget the past, though, we can remember that statement. We can hear that statement from our history teachers. Those who forget the past, dot, 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 fill in the blank. You know what you would answer? They would say, continue to repeat the same mistakes if they don't look at their history. You and I both know that saying is correct. It also helps us understand what the definition of an idiot is. Somebody that just comes back and they just do the same thing over and over, and we would put our hands on our face and go, "What are you doing?" Remembering the past, and more importantly, analyzing it for its patterns within your life, my life, and those that you live closest to, because each of us will have somebody that's willing to have what I labeled this as a subtitle is those difficult conversations in leadership. When we learn for our own growth, we're learning through reflection. So when a coach sits his players down and watches tape from last week's game, he's not doing it for the sake of popping popcorn and having an entertainment session. He or she is doing it for the opportunity for the athletes to see where they've made positive moves and how to maybe increase the magnitude of doing those again. Or they can look at the areas that they had weaknesses and emphasize how they've moved toward growth and get rid of the weaknesses and make them become strengths. So the coach uses this opportunity to point to his players and show them their actions, reflect on their patterns, contribute to understanding what their movements do to their wins and their losses. So we would recommend changes to their strategy as the players, and we'd see this as a result. We'd see their scores change. We'd see the impact of their choices made reflected in the performance of their game. Now we need to also understand and don't hear these conversations in silos. Reflection isn't confined just to sports. And of course, we'd all agree to this. We recognize that your reflection can be about even issues where I'm at right now. Third episode, we keep doing things here to improve what we had go wrong the week before. So public speaking is my example today. As this recording and live broadcast takes place, we understand the recorded event is priceless to make next week better. It provides real-time feedback and it helps us in many areas. So whether it's an issue of articulation, unction of how you pronounce and get through the movement with energy of what you're saying, how you approach things with cadence, and even more importantly, clarity. So the real question to do with you today is who's giving you feedback? Who's helping you look at your own self-reflection and aim your conversation to what moves you to greatness? So maybe the question is different, or maybe it's better yet. What do you do to not look at what you see? Because many times that's the question. We put ourselves in positions so we don't have to go see myself or listen to myself in audio. Many times people are like, I don't want to hear that. And they just go, I can't be part of that. I don't like the sound of my voice. So what we need to understand is a better question is what can we do to look at ourselves, provide self-reflection for growth? So the best athletes, and anyone for that matter, who's in an issue of life or a place in life where they perform or they stand or they're in contact even with any other human, we all need to then exercise the most of self-reflection. Reflecting on our actions and our attitudes is one of the most effective ways to identify areas where you and I need to change. That's the way that we recognize the places where we need to grow and what, more importantly, we need to do to keep moving forward to achieve your personal growth goals. Now, when I say personal growth, I'm not looking at self-help from a conversation of making myself appear righteous, so therefore I'm accepted before God. That's an entirely different conversation that we'll get to. But what I want us to look at is to understand that many of us don't even have set goals. Most people say they have a resolution for this year, but what did they do to make that an achievement for this year? So most people, and the statistic is awful high, don't really have set goals. So today, let's look at the question, how to look back at personal growth, even at your own self, with compassion. That's important. Let's start with this understanding. The purpose of self-reflection is not to beat yourself up. The purpose is to move you toward greatness, and maybe it's simpler than that. I just need to move to be better. So you'll transition yourself from being that person that doesn't care how they come off to other people to understanding that all things you do is giving off an air of who you are, and it's pointing someone either in a negative or positive way of how they've seen you, witnessed you, or been part of your life. The point is here today to examine how well you're meeting your goals. What are you doing to recognize where you are in comparison to where you want to be? And what are you doing to mark your progress toward where you need to be? Or maybe it's even where you want to be. So keep this in mind that you may need to consider these tips and techniques for helping yourself self-reflect and understand that it's a tool for self-growth. For the fact of the matter, I'm going to lead people out of my life, whether I like it or not. And that's where people really struggle. People struggle to admit that, like, yeah, in all things I do, I'm leading someone in some way. So here's the first exercise in self-reflection. So I'll take these and I'll drop them in the comments below on all these posts. But in the first one, these questions will help you set a baseline of recognizing where you are and what you need to find a greater source of happiness, and even that accomplishment or feeling successful in giving that life understanding of being fulfilled. So before you start answering though, think about the ways that you best learn. For me, I know it's writing stuff down. And I've finally gotten to a place in life where it's digital. I can write it down and pen it out in a notebook. So whatever brings you the most mileage, that may vary, but what I want you to do is understand the best thinking is oftentimes thinking out loud. What do I mean by that? So when I was a teacher in the classroom, I knew that a student got it when the student could then go to his neighbor and recommunicate the teaching he just learned because now they comprehend it. So if that's the case for you, use a voice recorder or even an app on your phone. Go to the voice app on your iPhone and just record your thoughts out loud. Then go back later, days, weeks, months later, and listen to them. It's scary. It's hard. As somebody who's been in the classroom and in the pulpit, the hardest thing sometimes to do is go back and listen to what you've communicated. There are days that you think that's awful. But then there are days you're like, is that really me? Like that, I really say that. So you need to understand whatever works best for you is right for you. No one's going to critique you or admonish you of a shame-based conversation of how you do this. So with a notepad, you're going to challenge yourself to these 5 questions. What are my strengths? What are they? It could be organizational management, it could be leading. Whatever those things are, note those down as the things that you do very well. And those are oftentimes the things that you do so well. They're also things that are easy for you to talk about, and they make you proud to be who you are. The harder thing is the second question. And this might even involve a group of friends that gather around you. What are my weaknesses? That's a dangerous, loaded question. It's a question that's hard to ask sometimes because we're fearful what people are going to tell you or me. I don't mean to give it as a third person conversation here, but know your personality traits or your personal habits as what you do in life as markers of understanding some of the things that may be your weakness or things that might even just make other people think less of you. So the third question is this. Oh, I'm smarter than this. I can do this. I didn't even think about this fact. You guys are going to love this as you're listening. I can post my own notes in my own comment chat. I'll learn how to use my system here better. So the third question is this. What makes me the most happy? What brings me the most joy? Write down the things in your life, whether they're tiny little things or they're big things that bring you joy. What are those things? For me, in my faith would be one of those, and my Lord and Savior would be the top on that list. Living a life full for Christ is something that I do to pursue my joy in seeing others have the true joy I have in Christ. So the fourth question is this. What are the things that snuff out your candle? What are the things that dim your joy or they take away your joy? Write down those things as well. And those things are usually the things that bring you the most stress. They usually create the most anxiety, or otherwise we would define them as the things that make you the least happy. Now be careful if you write down your spouse. If you write down your spouse, I'm going to challenge you to maybe figure out how you serve your spouse better and change that paradigm that you're living in. But maybe that's an offline conversation with you and I together. But today, looking then at the fifth question, what changes would you like to make in your life so that you can be free from some things? Maybe it's those weaknesses, and maybe it's a job even that would let you run free. And sometimes you might even get it in this podcast, hear my story of the change of career paths and what that looks like midlife. So those 5 questions: what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What makes me happy? And what are the things that dim my joy? What things challenge you? So in this self-reflection, you're going to have to take that and push it into a higher level of importance. We understand the things that we exercise are the things that we get stronger in. Doing this exercise is just the starting point. It's a good way to help you and I pinpoint our personal growth areas and our weak areas. And they help us achieve plans to start making corrective moves to become better. The real magic, though, happens when you make self-reflection part of your personal practice daily. Years ago, in preparations to preach, Jerry Bridges, an author, he's now passed away, but in his pastor, he used to talk about the picture of preaching the gospel to yourself as a daily exercise to understand the grace that was given to me is now imparted, it's imputed to me, and I get to live redeemed. So that's set free. So the real magic happens when you can understand that personal practice of self-reflection removed from the consequences of guilt and shame. And we're going to get to that for a moment here. You can do this short self-reflection every day and just do a quick check-in with yourself. Ask yourself at the end of the day, as you drive places, my kids will often get in the vehicle with me and say, Dad, can we turn the radio on? And I think it's like disbelief that they can't believe that I can travel somewhere without listening to the radio. But oftentimes those quiet times in the car are the only quiet times I get. And they're quiet times of self-reflection and focus and even outlining the day's agenda and the things I need to accomplish. So today, ask your question in a perspective of what makes you most grateful for today and what you're doing with today to make today different than yesterday. As you look at those things, oftentimes the very center is me. So I have to assess, how am I doing in those travels of my day? So what's the most important thing for you to work through? The most important thing is to make time, even if it's on the simplest, it's a monthly check-in. Until it becomes more frequent to become a weekly check-in, you got to start somewhere. With these benchmarks of starting somewhere, we'll then be able to see and pinpoint how far we've come and what we're doing to improve. Now, remember, as I'm speaking through this in my mind, I'm talking about the impact of my choice on my decision-making to make me stronger, to bring a greater impact to other people that I live with. So as we go forward, we recognize these longer periods of gaps in our lives help us have a chance to celebrate our progress. Somebody that hasn't seen you for a few months sees changes in you easier than the person that sees you daily. What I'm asking each one of us, including myself, is to elevate where we fall short and understand with our own ambition, step back, readjust your plans, assess your strategies, cry out to the Lord for help, and then make that new month's target aims to be achieved. When we understand recall and recognition, we understand that we have a blessing to have that recall. Oftentimes, though, in reflection, individuals struggle with the guilt or the shame that comes with the fact that they handled a situation poorly, or they had words that they spoke to somebody aggressively that they now feel guilt or shame over. We need to understand the greatest examples of forgiveness are given to us by grace in Christ. And if you ever have questions about that, message me. I'd love to have an offline conversation with you. But what we have today is the ability to anchor into what transformed us transforms others. Let me tell you just a quick story to end this lunchtime discussion. When I was a varsity coach, and my goal was to lead to grow, meaning lead in such a way that numbers of athletes would participate and track with us would grow in our numbers. So I was doing the very thing that we're discussing in this conversation, leading to grow, but then also understand the backside. Am I working to help others grow so they can lead and provide reciprocity of what's happening to others around them? I had an athlete, and Gary Kostek, if you're still listening to this, you know him well. Dallas, I'll use you by name because you're a story that is an example of my own brokenness. That's why I'm sharing it with you, but the right moves to make in it. One time in practice, athlete used some language and it got way out of control out in the field with all 150 athletes, and it got aggressive and it got loud between athletes. So the only thing I could do as a coach was to step in stronger than the situation to stop it and diffuse it. Sent both athletes their own ways. One went to the locker room. I don't actually know where the other one went. But as I reflected in the moments that had passed since the disruption occurred to how I disrupted it to send kids broken in their controversy back their own directions, I then had to reflect and ask myself, did I evidence the grace that's given me in my leadership of what I just did? So time started to grow and time became greater between the end of practice and the next thing I had going in my schedule. What was minutes became half hours, which became an hour, which then I had to weigh upon myself what I really had just done. So I decided and I made a choice. The grace that I received in Christ is not what I reflected out on that field that day. And I had to humble myself and go to an 18-year-old athlete and go on a mystery hunt around a building. And I finally found him in the locker room. I found him with attitude and disbelief, and what was never a hate for me had occurred to a hate and spite for me. But I walked in the locker room, and the thing that took place next was incredible. He never knew what was coming. As I walked in the room and as he sat on the bench, I knelt before him and in brokenness said, I need to apologize to you. How I handled that situation was completely wrong. But what I didn't realize was the evidence of the leader that you want to be manifesting itself. So when I say our actions have powerful impacts, I'm sure that athlete today could walk through that story and probably thought I was going to tear him apart when we were outside and never expect the leadership that he would be led by an example to be a different man, a different husband today now than he was when he was an athlete then. So as we conclude today, looking at self-reflection, I would just ask you, if you need helps along the way, let me know. If you want to understand how do we get better, just dig in. Start with a simple conversation with somebody that you trust and be vulnerable. It's hard. It's a risk. But I'd ask you, be vulnerable because the world around you needs you to be you, leading them the best that you can lead. Thank you for joining me for lunch today. I have Subway, and I'll be honest, I had co-workers that are dear friends of mine thinking they were going to ambush this, which I kind of was half ready for because today is my birthday. I'm not wearing my pink birthday girl sash because I'm not very girly, if anyone really knows me, but I'll put it on just to say I put it on. But to all you out there that listen today, thank you. Share this with somebody that you think will be helped by it. And if you do have any questions, thoughts, or comments, the door for messaging is always open. Have a great day.